Good afternoon. We're going to look at contextualization for the next 6-7 minutes. Just a reminder, this will all be online too, so you can look back at the PowerPoint, so you don't need to constantly pause this. If you ever get stuck, go back to your visual reminder so you can plot out what this is going to look like. Here's our prompt. It's the one you should have in front of you as we work through this. And I'm going to present 5 steps to each of you today. This is an overview of the 5 steps, and then what's going to follow is I'll go through each step in order per slide. So step 1 in a minute will be just one slide that we'll look at, and then we'll look at step 2. So you don't need to write down this stuff right now. Okay, so when we talk about step-by-step contextualization, I'm going to try and work through this as I would as I read any question, but we'll use for our purposes the question you'll be writing. So the first step when you think about contextualization, just think about the period in question and define it. They'll typically give you what are called bookend years. Where does the time period start? Where does it end? So when I see 1763, I just think that's the end of the French and Indian War. When I see 1783, I think approximately the end of the Revolutionary War. Step 2 is, okay, now that I've considered the time period, what do I want to do? Before, during, or after? And I'm going to call this one burring because I'm sort of doing before and during, which is acceptable. So I'm going to go slightly before this time period with French and Indian War to right at the beginning, the end of salutary neglect, which is dated as 1763. My third step, after I've thought about the period, defined the period, is to think about, so what big idea goes along with that? And in my mind, I'm going to focus on salutary neglect. So the fourth step is now to consider, so I've selected sort of before, during, so I'm working from 54 to 63. I've selected salutary neglect as a big idea. I need a couple facts, and these facts need to both relate to my big idea and a part of the question. And so I've highlighted for you here a change in self-governance to enforce mercantilism. Change deals with the question, skills change. Self-governance, that's an idea. It's an idea that they believed in. And the second fact that I'm going to go through is imperial regulations. My fifth step is to think about how I can transition to my thesis. This is the toughest part, so I've provided 2 examples. One is just a quick comparative statement, and the other one is more of a transition chronologically. And again, there are more than just these 2. These were just ones that I thought, these are pretty easy to make. I've already seen students make this type of statement. I'm just providing a label when I call it quick comparative statement or chronological transition. And so, here's the final product. Prior to the French and Indian War, the American colonists enjoyed a relaxed imperial system with the British known as salutary neglect. After the war, the British changed how much self-governance the colonists had as they sought to gain greater control over the imperial economic system known as mercantilism. Right? So I've given a couple facts. I have a big idea. I mentioned that I'm moving prior to the French and Indian War, and then I'm going immediately following it. And then my transition is, while a change in colonial relations with the British started immediately following the French and Indian War, those changes continued on throughout the 1760s and 70s. All that allows me to do is now write a thesis. That's if you don't use a formula. That's just a step-by-step process. If you're inclined to use a formula, remember, the goals are the same. You have a big idea, but this time, instead of you producing your own big idea, you're going to use the ation or ism, plus 2 facts with a link. And it could look like this. The beginning of the change in the relationship between Great Britain and the American colonies happened in the context of mercantilism. That's my ism. Great Britain tightened its hold over the colonies in the mercantile system by, 1, increasing taxes to help pay the debt, and the second was that happened as a result of the war. And here's my transition. The changing definition of mercantilism would continue on in the 1770s. As colonists resisted the new imperial system. And now I'm ready to write a thesis. So when you circle back and you start through these 5 steps, hopefully this can help you understand contextualization better.